obviously we're in rapidly changing times, and we spoke about that short cycle before. So I guess for us, our focus has been multi-res over the last 4 years. So we've done about 12 projects in and around the Brisbane City Fringe. So clearly active in that space. In terms of market conditions now, they're very tough. There's a variety of reasons that they're very tough. The predominantly, and hasn't been touched on much today, but it's construction pricing is astronomical at the moment.
Yeah.
Brisbane's got a very small base of subcontractors, and when we move from 10 projects to 150 projects, it causes a lot of challenges in that industry, and the prices push up very quickly. So the biggest constraint we had very quickly was the construction prices coming on, and we've got a lot of challenges with industrial relations in Brisbane CBD, which is not helping that proposition either. So construction prices is a real killer for us in terms of making a feasibility work. The land prices, they come up as the demand comes on as well. So to be able to buy a raw site, the prices were pushing up from $30,000, maybe a unit site, to a good site was the guys were talking about $100,000. The things were transacting on in good locations. So we had a constraint there on the supply or the value of the land inside the feasibility. And then the cost of sale started to get pushed up. So unfortunately we had probably lesser developers in the city fringe that were struggling to make their sales. So they would then start looking at solutions to how they would sell their products. And then from an investment selling perspective, that became the new norm. So probably the better developments around the city were then having to take on this increased cost of sale. So, we start off with a development and we're trying to make a 20% return, and by the time you factor in an increase in construction, which jumped probably 25% in 18 months, a cost of sale that went from 6%, some guys, our developments weren't having to pay the big commissions, but we were getting forced on us rental guarantees and things like that, which are effectively a cost of sale. So our feasibilities have just been crushed, and we've just got to a stage now through those three components, we can't make feasibilities work anymore. So then, developers will look at going to further out to buy cheaper land. They'll look to use lesser builders. So there's all these challenges that then come into the market because of the underlying product that they're building has a lot of risk around it. So, those fundamentals have really created some big problems or big challenges for probably the traditional Brisbane-based developers. The other big challenge that we've had is it's be careful what you wish for, but Brisbane City Council's got one of the most efficient town planning processes, in Australia. So that's what all the developers wanted. We wanted this streamlined, code-accessible certainty. The bankers wanted certainty. Everyone did. So Brisbane City Council put that in front of us, which was amazing. And then everyone in Queensland and Asia came to Brisbane and got a development approval in 2 months. And they dumped massive amount of stock onto the market. So the guys that were in the space, and we thought there was 10 developers in Brisbane, and then there was 200. So, guys were showing up in the valley, and they were buying a site in the afternoon, talking to the architect the next day, and they had sales 4 weeks later and 250 units on the go, and we're sitting there going, geez, we were working our site for 2 years. So, all those factors have, really created some issues. So the feasibility, they're just not working in the resi space anymore. And if people think that they are, they're missing something, in what they're actually trying to deliver, or they haven't spoken to a bank yet or actually had it really tested in what they're doing. So that's really stifled what can come onto the market. Yeah. So everyone's trying to deal with the wave of units that are in construction and are coming on. So I guess that process is happening now, and then, we were talking about settlement risk there before, and, again, from a funding perspective, we had two great things that happened. So senior debt was pretty easy to get 2 years ago, and the banks would also fund the investor who was purchasing the unit, and they'd also fund the investor in China. So the same day they decided to stop doing senior debt, they also stopped to fund the investor who'd already pre-committed to our projects. So it was one thing to cut the senior at the front off, that would slow the market down, but then they've cut the buyer off, and they're also funding at the front end. So there's all these guys that are caught with large projects with the same bank going, I know we're funded at the front end, but we're not funding your investor at the back end. So you're getting to the end of the project and going, guys, can you fund all my investors? And they're like, no. APRA's changed. We've got a board change down in Melbourne and Sydney, and we can't fund the investors, but make sure you pay us back on time.
Yeah.
So, they're the challenges we've got in the market, and people are, well placed and badly placed as that's coming on. So there are definitely challenges with with the settlements. Valuations are still holding up on good products, but the investors in Australia, their LVRs have been cut back, so they don't have the money in the super anymore. So the time in the settlements are increasing so that people can change it into their wife's name, their brother's name, joint name. So we're working with that. And then the poor old Chinese have just been cut off from every bank. So guys that are heavily exposed to Chinese nationals, and we thought that was a great idea 2 years ago when the sales were slowing down in Australia. There's not many people in the world that want to fund the Chinese, so they're sitting there going, I know settlement's coming up, but no one will lend me money. So there's definitely challenges in the market now for all those reasons, I guess.